I don't know why they put me on the tail end of the session. I don't know if that was because I'm Rodney Dangerfield or they knew everybody just couldn't wait to hear what I had to say. I want to bring you an update on the UAA. I think I have 2 slides, and in case you were at the regionals, you may remember we had some trouble with my slides because a certain blonde was operating the clicker for me. I won't mention Sue Coffey's name, but I'd asked her to come up this morning, and she said she had to leave, but she's still here. She just didn't want to help me. So, good morning. The UAA has been busy, and it is a joint committee. I chair the NASBA side of the committee, which has 11 members plus myself, and then the AICPA side of the committee is chaired by Gary McIntosh, who is out there someplace, right here. So, we've been extremely busy. We worked on a test. We looked at the test, and we were having some difficulties, or we felt like we were having difficulties, part of it being with some exchanges that were made by the ASB in transferring things from the auditing standards to the statement on standards for attestation engagements. So we looked at that and we thought, well, we've got some of these things that right now are not covered by the attest definition in the UAA. So we wanted to make sure that we could capture those in the attest definition for 2 reasons. One was we had a lot of people that were not CPAs that were performing the old SAS 70 engagements, which is now an SSAE 16 engagement, and they were using the language from the AICPA as to the reports that they were issuing in those SAS 16 or SSAE 16 engagements. We had no authorization to control their using that material. So by transferring or by changing the definition of a test so that it would capture all SSAE engagements, we now bring it under the regulatory body of the state boards of accountancy in our 55 jurisdictions. The exposure draft for the attest definition went out in July. The comment period has just ended. I believe it was last week or week before, around the 17th of October. And we are now gathering all those comments together, all 12, depending on how you count, Louise. So there was not a lot of comments regarding the attest definition. I think everybody understood what we were attempting to do there and wanted to have control of those people that were issuing those type engagements. So now, once your state adopts the new definition of a test, that's going to bring the definition or the practice and preparation of those test engagements under your jurisdiction. It's also going to restrict them to CPAs only to be able to use the language that the AICPA has issued for reports under the SSAEs. So we're doing 2 things at once. We're bringing that back to what we feel like is the best qualified people to perform those engagements, which that's the CPAs, and 2, we're restricting the practice of those that are not CPAs from using that language that would confuse the public to think that they might be a CPA because they were using that language that had been passed and approved by the AICPA in their SSAEs. So we felt like that was a good move. We felt like it was a move that needed to be done, and we apparently from a number of comments that we got, most people were supportive of that, and so it looks like that everybody agreed with what the UAA committee was attempting to accomplish with that, and we now have that almost complete. And I say almost because we still have to go through the comments, we still have to look and see if we're going to make any changes, and then we're going to come back and if we have any changes, we would make those. I can't tell you we won't have, but based on the comments, there's going to be very few. And once that's accomplished, then that will have to be voted upon again by the full committee of the UAA, and once we approve it at the full committee, it will go to the AICPA Board of Directors for their approval and to the NASBA Board of Directors for their approval. And we're hoping that that will happen shortly. Thank you, Louise. So, moving from a test, the other charge that we had this year that took up a considerable amount of time was dealing with firm mobility. Firm mobility was issued as an exposure draft this month, October, and the comment period will end on January 31st, 2014. So the mobility exposure draft is currently out for exposure. It is in your material. There's a copy of the exposure draft that's in your material. And we as the UAA committee covet your comments. We feel like that this one may not go as easily as the test did, but we want to assure you that nobody is going to tell your state that you have to have mobility, firm mobility in your state. That is up to your state to decide. What we would like to accomplish is to get some uniform language that for those states that desire to have mobility, and I think there's approximately 16 states that already have firm mobility, that we have some type of uniform language in adopting that firm mobility from state to state. One of the things that will not happen, and as long as I'm involved with the UAA, I can't promise you what somebody else will do, but I don't think NASBA will ever let a firm have a physical presence in your state, an office, a physical building, and not require licensure by your state. And this will not allow that either. If they have an office in your state, they are subject to registration by your board, by your jurisdiction. However, if they meet the requirements of what we are proposing for the firm mobility language, primarily firm ownership and peer review, and they do not have an office in your state, it will open up the interstate practice of the accounting within those jurisdictions. Now, a lot of people I've heard say, well, you know, that's just going to help the big firms. They're the ones that are pushing this. I practice in a small firm in South Alabama, and we have 15 people, and that's everybody. But we issue a test engagements or have a test engagements in 4 different states. And so it's something that would benefit the small practitioner if you happen to be in the corner of a state that borders more states that you practice in. So it's not just for the big firms, it's for everybody. It's going to make it easier to do the cross-border engagements, the attest engagements, and those engagements for which registration presently is being required and in the future may not be required. Now, having said that, for those states that are not interested in looking at firm mobility at this point in time, we are going to have an attest definition that will not change the requirements as far as registration of firms if you're requiring firms that come into your jurisdiction to register for attest engagements. We tried to bifurcate the definition of the SSA engagements so that you can still require registration for the same type of engagements that you did prior to the change of the attest definition. So again, that will be something that will be up to the individual states to determine with the attest definition. We're not going to tell you that you can't continue to have firms register. We're not going to tell you that you can't. That's going to be a state decision. If you go to mobility, then the same definition for attest is going to be within that mobility language, but the cross-border practice privilege is going to change from the individual to the firms. So we've tried to maintain as much as we could of the old language to give those states that don't want to go to mobility to leave you in the same position that you were in, as well as leaving the individual mobility part of that language in the same position it was in. So that's where we're at with those 2 exposure drafts. There was a lot of hard work went into them. We would appreciate your comments. The mobility will be back on the agenda for the UAA to meet sometime in February to take a look at the comments that come in and see which way we're going to go with those, what additional things that we may need to change or to add to before we finalize that and take it to the board of directors for votes. So having said that, I was in the president and chair's breakout session this morning at breakfast, And one of the hot topics that came up kind of right at the end of that meeting was inactive CPAs. What can an inactive CPA do? Well, we had a lot of things that they could do in one state and couldn't do it in another state, et cetera. That is one of the topics that the UAA committee is currently looking at. We have a task force that's looking at that, and so hopefully we'll be able to bring you some information regarding some model language possibly to go into the UAA regarding retired or inactive CPAs. Now, it would help us to accomplish that if you would share with us if you have already adopted language in your state regarding that particular area. If you would share that with the UAA committee, then we would have something to look at and see what some jurisdictions are already starting to do. Another area that we're going to be looking at in the upcoming year will be possibly a whistleblower provision to put into the UAA, so that when you're called in that situation that you know things aren't right in your client's organization and some things that need to be disclosed, but you cannot disclose them because of the laws in your state, that you would be reprimanded and punitively punished. We're going to try and create some type of exception from that in those instances where it would protect you from being punitively punished by your state board. Also, we still have an issue regarding work paper retention and clients' work papers that we'll be looking at over the next few months. So we still have a full agenda. We have worked diligently, we feel like, and have come up with 2 good exposure drafts, but I'm not here to tell you that they're perfect. There's 24 people in total that work on these committees, plus legal staff, plus support staff. So we do the best we can. We've come up with what we think are 2 good exposure drafts. Apparently we did pretty good with the test. We hope we did good with mobility, but we covet your input and see what we did. Take a look at it. Please read it. Please comment. Otherwise, we're just going to pat ourselves on the back and say, boy, we did a good job. Carlos, I'm kind of through, but I'd be glad to try and answer any questions that may be out there.
Would you like to, before you get your first question, would you like to introduce the chair of the AICPA committee?
Did y'all miss my introduction to Gary McIntosh earlier in my presentation?
I didn't see him stand up.
Well, Gary, stand up. Hey.
Maybe I should have said recognize. All right. We have questions for Ken. Surely with those issues that the UAA committee has on the table, we have at least one question.
Dang, Gary, we're doing a good job.
That's exactly right. I would remind you that the UAA is an evergreen document. The last major revision of the entire document was the 3rd edition. That was in the 97 or 99 when that was issued, and we've issued several editions since then to address the issues that have come before the various states. So we will continue to do that. We're not looking at a major rewrite of the entire Uniform Accountancy Act. So it is definitely is an evergreen document, and I want to emphasize that it's not something we're laying down and picking up. That committee will always be very active. Any questions? Oh, Monica, step to the mic, please, and identify yourself.
Good morning, Monica Peterson from the Arizona Board of Accountancy. I was wondering, with respect to the exposure draft on firm mobility, if there had been discussions relating to how the group that worked on the exposure draft envisioned enforcement working with firm mobility. Arizona already has firm mobility, as do several other states, but it hasn't been tested. So we have no notice, no fee, no escape. We have jurisdiction over firms who would provide any engagements in our state. But if they don't practice in our state, I'm just trying to envision when we actually get tested on either individual mobility or firm mobility, practically how we're going to enforce and protect the public. And I believe that it's the responsibility of the Arizona board because we have the jurisdiction, and I don't work under the premise that it will just be delegated authority to another state to deal with a problem that happened in Arizona. And different boards have different resources and different abilities to enforce. So just was curious if there was any consideration on enforcement.
I have no idea. I apologize. I couldn't hear what you were saying. So if you don't mind. The tone from the microphone just wasn't something that I was picking up.
First of all, great question. The UAA is very clear that the jurisdiction, as you pointed out, is with the state where the bad action occurs. So if someone comes into Arizona through mobility, either individual or firm mobility, it is up to Arizona to take the first action, to basically suspend, revoke, or somehow have remedial action against the practice privilege in Arizona. The UAA says that then you shall notify the home state. And just to give you an example, after 5 years of mobility, we've only had like 1 or 2 cases, and one is very fresh. It's in Colorado, and it's going to be referred to Texas. What NASBA said is this, and you also made another great point about some states have more resources than others. Here's what NASBA promises. If a state has a CPA that goes into another state and creates harm or a complaint action, and the home state doesn't have the adequate resources to do the investigation in their home state, NASBA will provide those resources. So if you have a state that's underfunded, that cannot take on an out-of-state case, if you need investigative support, whatever that might be, NASBA will step up and provide the resources, whether it's money, whether it's staffing, whatever you need, so that there's no excuse for any home state not to seriously look at the case that was referred to them. So far, we've been very blessed. I think this Colorado case being referred to Texas is the first one we have on record of actually true mobility. But we do know that some states right now, we've talked about at this meeting, may not have the adequate resources when they get the referral, so NASBA will step up. We will never have it be that a mobility case didn't get properly handled because of a lack of resource. So I hope that maybe answers part of your questions.
And aren't you lucky that I couldn't hear and Ken, because I can't make that promise. He can commit those resources and I can't. So thank you, Ken.
Yeah. And when he refers to mobility, he currently is referring to individual mobility, I believe. So that's very important, though, for the boards to know that NASBA will step up and bring not only dollars to bear, but human resources to bear also. Any other comments, questions?
And just to make sure that you understand, NASBA will not be in your state pushing firm mobility through your state society, through your legislatures, or through your state board. That will be your decision to make.
Just one other comment, and while I applaud NASBA stepping forward to deal with public protection, just an issue for other state boards and EDs to consider. We all have statutes that designate what our revenues are, how they're collected, and some states may be actually prohibited from accepting resources from NASBA depending on how their statutes are written, whether they're allowed to receive, gifts, donations. So just something for all states to be mindful and to maybe take a look at your statutes to see if you have a prohibition from being able to accept such gracious assistance.
And I think you asked about how it may be written in different states. Is that correct? Currently? Try that one, because or else come up here and talk with me. And I apologize. It's
That's
just,
no problem.
That's okay. Is this better?
that's better.
That's better.
I was just suggesting that all state boards should perhaps look at their existing statutes for how their various boards of accountancy funds are established. A lot of statutes are established where your revenues that come into the state are prescriptively defined. Some statutes allow gifts and donations, others don't. And so I just think it's an important thing to study to see if a state might need a change in their statute to accept resources from NASBA to help assist in enforcement and public protection should a mobility issue or case arise.
Ken Bishop can commit those funds. I can't. But I would, Ken, before you start, let me just share one thought. I understand that for some boards you may be looking at an economic situation as well as a regulatory situation. And my answer would be to talk to some of the states that have already implemented firm mobility and see what impact it has had on them. I don't think it's going to be the same impact on every jurisdiction.
Yeah, real quickly though, you make another great point, is most states, I think, would have a struggle actually accepting a check. But I can tell you in recent experience, in the Madoff case and other cases, NASBA hired staffing to go in to help review files. We've provided legal assistance to do interpretive work of that information. So I think it's pretty easy in most states for you to accept outside resources, but if we wrote you a check, it'd probably have to go into a budget, be appropriated, and probably wouldn't resolve the issue. But we have a lot of experience of how we can provide assistance to you, and we would provide it to the state in the form that we know you could accept it. So.
Do we have other comments? Okay, thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
That